You're asleep. Suddenly a soft paw touches your face. You open your eyes and your cat is staring right at you. Cute? Maybe, but depending on the situation, that tiny touch could mean something completely different. Cat behaviour is rarely just one thing. A single paw touch can mean several different things depending on the moment, the cat, and the situation. We'll look at 5 possible reasons, based on patterns cat owners actually report. Some are well understood. Some are still just theories. I'll be upfront about which is which. Quick question before we start. Has your cat ever placed a paw on you while you were sleeping? Drop a comment and let me know. It's easy to assume every touch means the same thing: affection. But cats communicate almost entirely through small physical signals like this, since they don't have the vocal range dogs do to express complex states. A paw is often doing more work than a bark or a whine ever could. That's part of why this behaviour is worth actually breaking down instead of brushing past. Context matters more than the touch itself. The same paw, in the same spot, can mean something completely different depending on what's happening around it, whether you're asleep or awake, whether the cat just walked in or has been curled up for an hour, whether it's calm or a little tense. Keep that in mind as we go through each reason, because a lot of the answer isn't really about the paw at all. It's about everything happening around it. Let's get into it. Cats have scent glands in the skin between their paw pads and in the fur around their cheeks and forehead. When a cat needs or rests a paw on you, it can leave a faint trace of its own scent behind. Many behaviourists believe this is one way cats mark the people and things they consider part of their world, not so differently from how they rub their face against a doorway or the corner of the couch. It's not usually a dramatic one-time thing. It tends to happen gradually, a light touch here, a longer rest there, day after day. Over time, you end up smelling a little bit like theirs, at least to another cat's nose. Think of it less like a stamp of ownership, and more like a cat quietly including you in its map of home. If you've ever had 2 cats and noticed one gets oddly persistent about touching you right after the other cat was in your lap, that scent marking instinct is probably part of what's going on. Some owners notice this most clearly after they've been petting a neighbour's cat, or handling another animal their own cat suddenly wants extra contact, almost like it's re-establishing its claim. This is also part of why so many cats need, before they settle in next to you, pressing their paws rhythmically against a blanket, a cushion, or your leg. Kneading works the same scent glands, and many kittens pick up the motion early, while nursing. Adult cats often keep doing it for the rest of their lives, usually right before they get comfortable and fall asleep beside you. Example: a viewer once shared that her cat would tap her hand every time she came home smelling like her sister's dog. Within a few minutes of settling in, the cat would walk over and rest a paw right on her sleeve, almost like it was remarking its favourite person. This shows up in multi-pet households too. Owners with both a cat and a dog sometimes notice the cat becomes more paw-touchy right after the dog gets attention, not out of jealousy exactly, more like a quiet reset of "this is still my person." It's a small, almost automatic behaviour, not a calculated one, which is part of why it happens so consistently across so many different cats. It's a small gesture, but to another cat, that tiny trace of scent says something simple. This human belongs in my safe place. Here's where things get a little more interesting. Cats are quick learners, and they're especially good at picking up cause and effect, especially when the effect involves food, attention, or a door opening. A paw tap is one of the clearest, quietest tools they have to communicate that without a single meow. You're petting your cat, and it taps your hand that can mean keep going. You're doing something it doesn't like. And it taps again sometimes. That's a polite way of saying that's enough. No fuss, no drama, just contact. The interesting part is what happens next. If you respond consistently, if a tap reliably gets you to keep petting, get up, or open a can, your cat learns that the tap works. Not because it's plotting anything, but because that's simply how learning works for most animals, including us. Behaviour that gets rewarded tends to repeat, and cats are remarkably consistent about noticing what gets a result. Over time, this can turn into a surprisingly precise system. Some cats develop a whole vocabulary of taps: 1 for pet me, 1 for stop, 1 for I'm hungry now, not in 5 minutes. And the more reliably you respond, the more refined that system becomes. You can usually spot this most clearly around meal times. A lot of owners notice their cat doesn't just meow near the food bowl it walks over, taps a hand or an arm and waits. If that doesn't work, it tries again, maybe a little more insistently, before escalating to a meow. The tap comes first because, for a lot of cats, it's historically been the move that works fastest. Example: one cat owner noticed her cat would tap her arm once, wait a few seconds, and if nothing happened, tap again a little harder each time. She realised she'd unintentionally trained her cat that persistence pays off, simply by responding on the third tap instead of the first. Without realising it, you may have trained your cat to train you. This isn't unique to cats. By the way, it's the same basic principle behind training any animal, including us. The difference is that cats tend to be unusually patient and consistent about it. A dog might give up after a couple of tries. A lot of cats will simply keep adjusting the approach softer, harder, longer, more insistent until something works. It's less about intelligence in the abstract, and more about persistence paired with very close observation of what you actually respond to. It's also worth saying this cuts both ways. Just as your cat can train you to respond to a tap, you can shape which taps stick around simply by being consistent yourself. Owners who respond the same way every time, say, only getting up for food once the bowl is genuinely empty, tend to end up with cats that tap less overall, not more. The system runs on consistency, and that consistency can come from either side. So it's less your cat is controlling you, and more your cat has figured out what works, which, honestly, is a pretty smart way to communicate without saying a word. This is the one that tends to get people's attention, so let's handle it carefully and honestly. Cats are sensitive to changes in their environment, including changes in the people they live with, things like stillness, breathing patterns, temperature, or unusual sounds. Some cat owners describe their cat placing a paw on them or lying against their chest during moments when the person was sick, unusually still, or breathing differently than normal. It's important to be careful here. This is not a proven medical ability, and cats are not trained to detect illness. What we can say, based on how cats generally behave, is that they're naturally alert to changes in their surroundings, and a person who is asleep, unwell, or moving less than usual is exactly the kind of change a cat might notice and react to. Sometimes that reaction is staying close, sometimes it's a paw resting on you, as if checking that you're still there. There are anecdotal stories shared by pet owners, not verified medical cases of cats acting unusually alert, or staying unusually close to someone, shortly before a health issue was discovered. A few of these stories have made the news over the years, cats that seemed to sense something was wrong long before any human did. These accounts are worth taking with curiosity rather than certainty. There isn't solid research proving cats can reliably detect illness the way some dogs have been trained to. But it's also true that cats pick up on far more sensory information than we give them credit for subtle shifts in scent, sound, and movement that we simply don't notice ourselves. So what's actually happening on any given night is probably a mix of things. A cat's paw on your chest at 3 a.m. is far more likely to simply mean it wants space on the bed, or it's cold, or it just woke up and wandered over. But every so often, in a smaller number of cases, something more genuinely attentive may be going on. It also helps to remember how differently cats experience the world. Their sense of smell is many times more sensitive than ours, and their hearing picks up a far wider range of frequencies, including sounds well beyond what human ears register. None of that proves a cat knows something is wrong, but it does mean a cat sharing your bed is picking up on a stream of small signals: breathing, movement, even subtle changes in scent that simply never reach our own senses. Example: a viewer wrote in that her elderly cat began sleeping pressed against her leg every night during a period, when she had the flu, something the cat had never done before. When she recovered, the behaviour stopped completely, almost overnight. Is that the cat checking in? Maybe, or maybe the cat simply noticed she was staying in bed longer than usual and found that a good, warm place to settle. Both explanations are entirely reasonable, and we may never know for sure which one it was. Whether it's curiosity, warmth, or simple companionship, it's one more reminder that cats notice far more than we give them credit for. It's worth adding a note of caution here, too. None of this means a cat's paw is a substitute for actual medical attention, or that you should read into every touch as a warning sign. Most of the time, it isn't. But it's a good example of why dismissing cat behaviour as random often says more about how little we've studied it than about what the cat is actually doing. Vets and behaviourists who work closely with cats often point out that owners tend to underestimate how observant their cats actually are. Simply because cats don't announce what they notice the way dogs often do. A dog might bark or pace. A cat is far more likely to just quietly reposition itself closer to you, without any fanfare at all, which means this kind of attentiveness is easy to miss unless you're specifically looking for it. Either way, if your cat has ever done this, I'd genuinely like to hear about it in the comments. This reason feels softer, and there's decent research behind cats forming real attachments to their people, closer to how dogs bond with owners than a lot of people expect. Studies on cat behaviour have found that many cats treat their owners as a genuine source of comfort and security, not just a source of food. When someone is quiet, sad, or withdrawn, some cats respond by staying close, without demanding attention in return. A gentle paw touch in these moments often isn't about food or play. It's closer to simple companionship, the cat version of I'm here. You might notice it after a hard day. Your cat doesn't meow, doesn't ask for anything, just settles next to you and rests a paw on your leg or hand. It doesn't try to climb into your lap or demand play. It just stays. Some owners also notice a soft tap after they've fed or cared for their cat, not proof of gratitude in the human sense, but a moment of calm connection that feels a lot like it. What makes this reason interesting is how selective it often is. Plenty of cats that are otherwise independent, even a little aloof, will suddenly become far more physically present during a hard stretch, an illness, a loss, a stressful week, and just to suddenly go back to their usual distance once things settle. Some researchers who study cat-owner bonds describe this in terms of attachment styles. Similar to concepts used with dogs and even young children, some cats are more securely attached and confident being close, while others hang back more and only draw closer during moments that clearly call for it. Either way, a paw offered during a hard moment tends to be one of the more deliberate, untransactional gestures a cat makes. Example, one long-time cat owner described her cat as allergic to affection most of the year until the week she lost her job. For 3 days straight, the cat sat beside her with one paw resting on her knee, something it had never done before or since. We can't know exactly what a cat is thinking in these moments, but the pattern cat gravitating toward quiet, low-energy company during hard times shows up often enough that it's worth taking seriously. There's a practical side to this too. Multiple studies on human-animal interaction have found that petting a calm cat can measurably lower a person's heart rate and stress hormones. So even if we can't say for certain what the cat is experiencing, the physical contact itself tends to be genuinely calming for the person on the receiving end, which might be part of why this particular kind of touch feels so different from the others. It also tends to be a two-way street. Cats that receive gentle, low-pressure affection during calm moments, not forced petting, just being allowed to approach on their own terms, often become the ones most likely to reciprocate that closeness later, during a harder moment. The relationship builds gradually, the same way it would with a person. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Your cat just wants to feel safe, and being physically connected to you helps with that. A cat that keeps its paw resting on you, rather than tapping and pulling back, is often just maintaining contact. It's a comfort behaviour more than anything else, similar to how a cat might press against a wall, tuck into a tight space, or curl up in a small box. Being near you, paw touching skin, can simply feel secure. To us, it's just a paw. To a cat, physical contact can be a quiet way of saying, "I'm comfortable enough to let my guard down." This can also show up as a subtle way of claiming a spot next to you, rather than controlling the room the way it might first appear. If another pet tries to get close, a cat holding position with a paw on you is often just reinforcing "I'm comfortable here," not issuing a warning. It's less about defending territory, and more about not wanting to give up a spot that already feels safe. For cats that are naturally more cautious rescues, older cats, or cats that took time to warm up to their owner, this kind of sustained contact can be especially meaningful, since it usually only shows up once real trust has been established. You can usually tell the difference between this and something more territorial by watching the rest of the cat's body. A relaxed tail, slow blinking, soft ears, that's a cat settling in, not defending anything. A stiff posture or flattened ears alongside the paw touch would tell a very different story, but for most cats, resting a paw on you at the end of the day, the body language matches the calm intent behind it. Example, a shelter cat, adopted after a rough start, took months before she trusted her new owner enough to sleep nearby. The first real sign of trust wasn't purring or needing it, was a single paw, resting lightly on his arm, that stayed there the entire night. That's often what this behaviour comes down to: proximity, comfort, and trust, expressed the simplest way a cat knows how. It's also why this tends to be the last behaviour to show up in a new relationship with a cat, and often the first one to disappear if something in the environment changes: a move, a new pet, a stressful few weeks. If a cat that normally sleeps pressed against you suddenly stops, it's usually not personal. It's just as likely a sign that something in its routine or environment has shifted, and it's worth a bit of extra patience while it settles back in. One more thing worth mentioning before we wrap up: some cats almost never do this, and that's completely normal too. Paw contact is just one of several ways cats express closeness. Some rely more on staying nearby without touching. Some prefer slow blinking from across the room, and some show attachment mainly through following you from room to room. A cat that never places a paw on you isn't necessarily less bonded. It might just be speaking a slightly different dialect of the same language. That's actually a useful reminder for all 5 of these reasons. None of them are universal rules, they're patterns, and different cats lean on different ones depending on their personality, their history, and how they were raised. A cat that grew up around a lot of gentle handling as a kitten may be far more paw touchy than one that came from a more independent start in life. So the next time your cat rests a paw on you, it's worth pausing before deciding what it means. A quick tap and release often points to marking or communication. A tap that repeats when you stop doing something usually means your cat has learned that action gets a response. A paw that lingers while you're deeply asleep might be your cat simply noticing something different about you. A quiet touch during a hard moment often reflects real emotional connection. And a paw that just stays there unmoving is usually about comfort and closeness. None of these explanations cancel each other out. Either the same cat might tap you for attention in the morning, mark you with a longer touch in the afternoon, and simply rest a paw on you at night, out of pure comfort. Cats don't stick to one mode of communication any more than people do the meaning shifts with the moment, and that's part of what makes paying attention to it worthwhile. One small gesture, but depending on the context, it can mean several different things. The next time that tiny paw touches your hand, don't just smile. Ask yourself, what is my cat trying to tell me? If any of these reasons match something your cat does, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Real stories like that are honestly the best part of making these videos. If you enjoyed learning a little more about how cats communicate, consider subscribing. We cover cat behaviour like this every week. Understanding these small signals doesn't just satisfy curiosity, it usually brings you a little closer to your cat, since so much of what looks like random behaviour turns out to be a cat quietly telling you something, one paw at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.